my name is Barbara Graves. I'm 61 years old. I'm a retired special needs communication facilitator. I'm married, I have two grown-up daughters, and I emigrated to Australia in 2004.
Why were you first prescribed an antidepressant?
I was a typical worrier. I would, worry about, the kids. I would worry about work. So I visited the GP approximately 30 years ago, and he prescribed me an antidepressant. I was just a typical worrier.
How did the antidepressant make you feel?
They actually made me feel really horrible. I had headaches, insomnia, I had a dry mouth, and I just felt really, really drained. So I went back to the GP and he prescribed another antidepressant, which the symptoms were really, really similar. What I did notice that, I still had the anxiety, but it was numbed down. But unfortunately, not only did it numb down my anxiety, it numbed down my emotions. I couldn't feel any intense happiness or sadness anymore. I lost the ability to cry. I also noticed if I accidentally missed a dose, I would feel severely ill. I'd get headaches. I'd feel really dizzy. I'd just feel really, really awful.
What has your experience been when you came off or reduced the dose of the antidepressant?
Approximately 18 months ago, I decided to taper. I tapered down to 10 milligrams. I went to my doctor, who then told me that I could take alternate doses and I could take them every second day, third day, fourth day. And so that's what I did. After a few weeks of that, suddenly I developed some physical symptoms that were really odd. I started to sweat. The sweat would just pour off me. I began to get this upper back muscle pain, and I would get so bad that I couldn't walk for long. I also started to get these internal tremors, and I actually ended up in hospital with a hypertensive crisis. My normal blood pressure is pretty low, but by the time I got to hospital, I had severe head pain and my blood pressure had literally shot up to 235 over 135, and I had 6 people working on me. I think they thought I was going to stroke out. Loads of tests done in hospital, but nothing they could find to put down to why this crisis occurred. Came out of hospital, and then the next symptom I started to get was terror. It was a terror that totally encompassed me. It was something that I'd never, I've ever had before. It was just awful. I became sensitive to noise. I was fearful of people visiting. I couldn't watch the television. I couldn't read a book. I was petrified to listen to music because it would jar me. Overnight, I started to be jolted awake with this head pain and this really unusual, weird, horrible, unpleasant symptom going through my shoulders, down my back, into my groin. I had hot patches of skin, burning hot patches of skin on my torso. I would have jerks, muscle jerks, intense dreaming, just really, really fearful. I'd wake up in the morning and I would be terrified. This would go on all day, and then perhaps in the evening I would get a little bit of relief, but not a lot. But then every day every night I would be terrified to go to bed because I knew that this was going to start all over again. I also got tinnitus, burning head pain. I was bedbound by this point. I would cry out to my husband, I'm dying. I'm dying. What is happening to me? It was also the first time ever in my life, that I felt suicidal, because it wasn't the fact that I wanted to die. It was just the fact that this terror was so heavy. I just wanted to escape my body. It was just absolutely awful. But fortunately, in the midst of all this horror, it started to dawn on me, because of all the testing we'd had done, all the extra testing, that, wow, I wonder if this is down to withdrawal, the tapering. So what I did, we did some research as a family, and we found the online group Surviving Antidepressants, and they were absolutely great. They, they said to me, what we think has happened, you've been on this drug for such a long time. You've been told to miss dosage. You've come off it really quickly. We think that you're, suffering from severe antidepressant withdrawal. It all started to make sense, especially when I read the other stories on the site. So we then visited a GP, and I tried to tell him, this is what I think's happening, and he just said, no, this is anxiety. You're suffering anxiety. You've not been well. But unfortunately, I'm still on the antidepressant. I have, stabilized a little bit. It took a few months for the terror to subside to a reasonably manageable effect. But unfortunately, I still have many symptoms left. I have the severe head pain, tinnitus, numb hands, and it's still going on every day. I have started to taper now, but I'm tapering quite small doses. But this is a job and a half itself, because unfortunately you can't get my medication in small doses. The smallest tablet I've got is 20 milligrams, so we have to use a scale and a scalpel, and this is going to be a long journey for me. I think it's going to take me years.
How has antidepressant withdrawal impacted your life as a whole?
Depressant withdrawal for me has just been devastating. Our retirement wasn't supposed to look like this. It's affected not just me, the trauma of it, it's affected my whole family. My poor husband was so heartbroken looking at me in such distress. I also have, as I said before, I have lingering symptoms at the moment, so I can't drive. I can't make too many plans within this tapering experience, because you never know how you're going to feel from one day to the next. Financially, it's cost us a lot. We had to, spend thousands of money on testing and consultations when we didn't really know what was happening, especially in the beginning. My scale that I use, because I'm so sensitive to this drug that's got a really high risk reputation, that we spent $800 on that. And we've got a fairly modest superannuation amount, so we could really ill afford this money at this time in our lives. And one of really the worst thing that's been for us is the isolation in regard to medical professionals. They just really they do not understand the severity of withdrawal symptoms. It was just terrible visiting doctors and realizing they had absolutely no idea about this experience. Also for me, the journey that I've got, it's still unknown. The fear of the unknown. How am I going to be as I taper down? Am I going to get that terror back? I just couldn't cope with that terror again. It was just beyond anything that I'd ever experienced. And also, will I get off the drug? And if I do get off the drug, are there going to be any lingering consequences?
What did you need from health services that you did not receive?
For me, it would have been curiosity from the medical professionals, a pure curiosity, what's going on here. But above all, I wish they'd been educated. I wish they'd been educated in the severity of the nature of these withdrawal symptoms. And I wish they'd been educated in safe tapering protocols. If they'd have been educated, the first doctor that I saw would never have made me go to alternate doses and said that I would get off in a couple of months. The second time I saw the doctors in emergency, they would have asked me about my medication. They would have said, oh, have you had any changes to your medication? Were there any dose changes, etc.? And then lastly, that last doctor, when I tried to talk to him about what was going on, would have been able to see through my tears and been able to differentiate the symptoms of withdrawal from relapse